just ornery. Someone tells me not to do something, I'm gonna do
I
it.
know. Yeah.
What's up? How you doing? We're the Moon My Twin. Okay, I had to get that out of the way. Okay, I'm ready now.
I am Christopher Quattro. I live in Elkins, West Virginia.
I'm Charles Earl Richard. I currently live in Dry Fork, West Virginia.
I am Ime. I live in Dry Fork, West Virginia.
We are
the
Moon My Twin.
We pull different elements from all of the things that we're all influenced by. We all have separate influences, and I think a little bit of all of that sort of comes out.
I will say that it's probably the hardest thing for us to do is describe our band in simple genre, which is the thing I like the most about us sometimes, that we don't fit into any particular scene, which is cool. So it's an unusual mix of things that probably on paper wouldn't make any sense, but for us they do.
When people ask us to describe ourselves in this band, I think that musically we have a very limited overlap, which allows us each to explore our own, the thing that we love about music ourselves within this container of anything goes. So we can really hit all points of what people would call genre without really feeling like we're getting far away from ourself. Like we embody a lot of different kinds of music, a lot of different influences, and in some ways we are just solidly in the center of rock, but rock's a huge genre, and there are times that even that label isn't enough to incorporate some of the, weird soundscapes that we enter into, or the folky realm that I come from, or the different backgrounds that you guys come from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would never call myself a rock guitarist. I don't think that's where I come from. I think I come from a lot of different things, and I have a long history of playing in lots of different genres, and now they've come together in a weird smorgasbord of a lot of different influences from a long 30 years of different listenings and different practices. So
and I would say the same. Like my influence spectrum is like pretty huge, and so I don't, all of those little parts have moments where they all see some sort of like, presentation within the scope of what we're doing. So.
Great. And nice segue, who are your musical influences?
When people ask about our musical influences, I think about like the musical encyclopedia of all of the bands that have come before. And I'm into like A through M, and Chris is into N through Z, and Chuck kind of is a little bit through the whole spectrum where, we really are influenced by a little bit of everything. My background, I started as a classical piano player. That was my first introduction to music. Got really into the folk rock scene outside of Boston, heavily influenced by 90s alternative grunge rock. And, it's shifted every few years since then. I'm really influenced by world music, folk music from around the world, specifically. And then if I always like to think, of course, that I listen to the good music. If it's good, I like it. I don't think about it as far as genre, I guess.
I would say the same. Like, I don't really. There's not really like, I'm not like a genre specific listener or anything. I'm all over the place from rap to metal to jazz to like solo piano music kind of stuff. So I'm like, it's just an amalgamation of like all these different things that I really enjoy listening to and trying to figure out how to like impart those little bits of all of my influence into how I play with this band,
I'm definitely the most narrow I like the least of everything, of everybody here. And I definitely skew avant-garde and esoteric and obscure. And then I like surf music. Like I'm funny about what lands with me and what doesn't. And anymore, I listen to about the same 12 things over and over and over again, and much prefer to make my own music than listen to someone else's anymore. So
maybe the musical encyclopedia is like, I'm into A through W. Mm-hmm. You're like X through Z.
I'm like when you get those like stencils as a kid, and it's like all the letters, but then there's like the umlaut and the exclamation point on the end. Like that's what I listen to.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
I moved to West Virginia 12 years ago, and have always lived in or around big cities before. So the identity tends to be one single place. And what I love about West Virginia is just the space is wider, like between Dry Fork and Charleston, it might sound like 2.5 hours, but like that's our playground. That's where we go. I'm playing a show in Morgantown tonight. We've got shows, all over the state, and everywhere we go feels like home. And that sense of belonging is really powerful from someone that didn't really grow up feeling that where I came from. Beat that.
Oh, well.
Just kidding.
And here comes the devil on the shoulder. West Virginia absolutely solidified all of my musical philosophy, but as a counterpoint to what I was experiencing after I got moved to West Virginia. I'm not from West Virginia. I grew up in New Jersey, and I came from a completely different world of influences even as a kid. And when I got displaced to West Virginia as a teen, my rebellion was, if you like it, I don't. If it's on MTV, I don't want it. If my neighbor likes it, I'm not into it. And it set me up to hunt my own path, and irrevocably changed my life forever. On even that's why I started creating music, was I wasn't feeling represented, and I needed to have a voice and didn't have one, and it set me up forever. So in a way, West Virginia is utterly responsible for me being a musician and for my influences, but as rebellion, not as inclusion.
Damn. All right.
Yeah, that's way too good.
It's also very accurate.
I mean, for me, it like being here and all of the different like musical projects that I've been in since I moved into like Canaan, Thomas Davis area like 14 years ago. It's just like expanded my palette of all the things that I pull from, and I would say that like my like abilities as a drummer have broadened, and I'm much better for it. I'm more dynamic than I've ever been, especially because of this band. But also like another project that I'm in, it's like sort of forcing me to play a little bit more mellow, just so that I can like do all of the things that I'm doing in that. And it's, that's informing what I do in this band as well. So Ime had asked me to play a gig with her at a place in Davis called Wicked Wilderness. And we did one rehearsal prior to the gig, which is we actually rehearsed in a little cabin that I live in now. It was me and Ime and another friend of ours who was playing bass at the time. And we played a set, and then at set break, Chris showed up with his guitar and his amp, and he was like, y'all still playing? We were like, yeah. And so he got up and joined, and that was sort of like the beginning of that journey into what we have become since then. But ultimately, I think really where we are now is super solidified during COVID, and the recording of our first little EP. It really sort of became what it is now during that time period when it was just the three of us sort of hanging out and starting to really like dial in all of our little idiosyncrasies and and finding where we all fit together a whole lot better.
During COVID, we bubbled together, and so we had an opportunity without gigs, without touring, without any of the kind of pressures that bands sometimes feel to get out there. We just made music and got real creative, and that time really allowed us to find a sound that was uniquely ours instead of something that would fit good in this venue or fit good on the road or having to back any albums. We released our first EP and almost immediately went into this like incubation period that lasted for about a year and was really, I think, formed, like you were saying, really formed who we are as a band.
Yeah.
Not to mention that we, for being what wasn't a pleasant period in history, it was a unique opportunity as a creative to be able to sit in one location and be uninterrupted by the expectations of society through our labors. Like, I was able to just play all day. Like, for the first time in my entire adult career, I had 2 years where I had nothing better to do than, say, work at guitar. And I think it was apparent when we came back together that it was like, oh wow, you've been sitting and really, really thinking about what you're doing, and I think we grew exponentially separately, and then when we came together, those growths just egged each other on. That we just better ourselves every time we were getting together, challenging each other for what we went and wood shopped and came back with for each other. So
we would get together and we would just start playing, and for like the first hour of rehearsal, we weren't rehearsing a song that was already written. We were writing, improvising, feeling each other out, and that impacts how we perform to this day, where we can show up on stage and we very often will start with an improvised piece or throw one in during the set, and it's not planned. It's just like, oh, and here we are. We're gonna feel this one out, and we trust each other enough to really lean into that, and that's not something that I take for granted at all.
No, same.
Not at all.
Yeah, it's a unique and special communication that not every band gets to experience, because some bands are extremely rehearsed and rigid, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different method, and it's not always how we do things. We do things extremely loose sometimes, and everything is up for reinterpretation. Even after we've been doing it for a while, every once in a while we get a wild hair and go, let's try that in 3/4. What happens if we do it that way with something completely different, and it's for someone myself whom as a soloist, all I do is improvisation, so I prefer improvisation to a common idea. I like to come up with something new every time. I find it to be refreshing and challenging. So I love that I have a band that's an attribute that's supported and appreciated. It's nice because some people want to know what you're doing or want to tell you what to do. And the only other time I feel like I'm told something to try, it's usually for the better, because we all have really good ideas about what we're doing. So.
There's times where Chris will bring in a riff, or there's times where like Ime will sort of have like the idea of a song already, and bring it to us, so there's different parts, and then sometimes it's just literally like we start playing something and that somehow turns into a song, so there's multiple different versions of it. And I think that's why it works so well. I think that's why, we've really honed in on sort of like the kind of the way to go about it when something new is being presented or something like that. And yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, Ime has an incredible catalog of songwriting that sometimes gets pulled from, that's established, and often we take it and we scramble it and turn it into something new. Sometimes we do something that's a little more closer to that idea that she initially came up with. Sometimes it isn't. I am a random noise generator. If you put a guitar in my hand, I will write music the entire time it's in my hand. I will write a riff every second if I'm sitting there and doing it. I'm not the best guitarist in the world, but I am really good at making shit up. Like, that's the one thing I can do. Excuse me if swearing is not allowed. I definitely will make things up on the fly. I will write a song sitting cold anytime I'm sitting with a guitar.
You write songs in your sleep.
Yeah, I do.
I mean, I'm sure this is no guitars. Some people have no smartphones in the bedroom. Your wife says no guitar in the bedroom, or you'll just sit there all night.
I have fallen asleep many a times in my life with a guitar on me in bed, watching TV. It's a thing that happens. I play hours a day. So, but
I think what makes our writing really work and really flow is that we can all bring ideas to the table, and we have ways of working with that. I tend to be more of the I'm going to write the structure of the song and verses and choruses, because the singer has to have a melody that is consistent or at least recognizable sometimes. And then the way that we bounce off each other, or when you bring a riff and I'm like, oh, it immediately I can feel the structure forming, and then I feel like Chuck is this super ninja arranger where he's just what about this, and I'm like, I never would have thought about that. It's perfect for pulling it together. And then I feel like all three of us really lean into each other for okay, this needs something, and I'll look at Chuck, and it'll be going somewhere else, and then Chris will vibe with that, and then I'll keep, it's just this feeding system where you give it a little bit and so much comes back out.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And a lot of those moments aren't even necessarily something that it's not really something that's being talked about. It's just it just happens through the way that we play together.
The osmosis of how we talk through music, not necessarily communicate. What we glean from one another just after all the hours we've spent together, that it's that, tired idea of musical telepathy between bands. But there is something to it. I don't know what that communication is, that when you spend time with the same musicians, you can read each other's thoughts in a way. And we certainly do that. So
well, because we're listening, and I think the bigger our ears are to each other, the more receptive we are. It's not a thought process necessarily. It's not I'm going to write a poem and it's going to be like this. You can channel all art. I believe this, all art can be channeled, and I think that being able to do that in collaboration with other artists like we're able to do here is just a whole other experience that I'm grateful for.
To Ime's point, we are by ear players. Not every band does that. Some bands have a practiced part, and they're playing that part. And again, the perfection of it can often lead to really, really digestible and catchy music. But it's different when you are literally listening to think of what you're doing next. Yeah. Is a very different musical situation, and I think we excel at that.
It happens in the moment. Yeah. It's not okay, in 4 measures I'm going to do this. It's we're going there now.
Yeah, that's a chord. That's a new chord now. Okay, we're doing it. It's So, yeah.
And then last question: what do you want listeners to get out of your music? What's the takeaway?
A headache. No,
That's actually sort of what I'm after.
We really like to challenge each other, and so I think as far as when we present music to an audience, we're not there for the lowest common denominator, people just looking to party and have a good time. Can we go there? Sure. And we do during every set. We try to have a few moments of lightness and brevity, but we're also not afraid to go in any direction that needs to be gone in. And so sometimes the lyrical components are dark and tragic and to a point. For me, I hope that our audience can go on a journey with us. I always feel we're going to take you somewhere, and it might be uncomfortable in places because it's hard lyrically or complicated musically, but it's going to come full circle. I really believe that in music as an art form, all emotions should have should be allowed to be present. And so sometimes and I lean into the darker things, I think, with this band thematically, just because it's a heavier rock kind of band. I think that music is the art form that connects directly in time with the emotions. So the fact that this band is heavier and more capable of going into directions that are unknown, those elements of the unknown, the darker parts of our psyche, these things come up naturally, and that's okay here. That feels right here. And that is not to say that we won't get light and look at some of the just true joys as well, but that it's really, we're open-ended as far as what are we trying to present? Well, we're trying to say, I think, with how we play together and what we bring to a live show is be here now. This is what you get. And if you're having certain feelings, if you've had certain experiences, that's fine. We're here now. If you want certain things, if you're reaching for something, that's great. But be here now and let the music wash over you, let the feelings go through you. And that to me is, if not the purpose of life, at least the purpose of music.
I was just going to say catharsis.
Yeah, good.
That's, the summary of that was, I think that's what we aim for or for me, particularly musically, because, I like the darker realms of music. I like music that's considered ugly. I like sounds. I like things that are harsh. I like challenging listens. I like esoterica. I like free jazz. I like rebellion in music. I like for people to use ugly things and volume for a point to say, this might make you go, what is that? And you literally and physically convulse to something. To me, there's a really great power in the hideous when it comes to music. But I also find it beautiful. And I think that's the things I try to bring. And the things I try to bring to a performance is, you're not going to necessarily see someone else do this exactly like this, and you're never going to probably see us do this song again like you just saw us do it. The organicness of music, to me, should have an ebb and a flow and a growth, and not be stagnant and not be so rigid. And I think we've really allowed music to really just become pigeonholed in a genre, bottled in 2 minutes, made for, repeat listen, made for, to fit on Spotify really comfortably. And that's fine. I mean, if that's what you want to do and that's the things that most people want to consume, I mean, it's what's going to happen. But there's plenty of room in this world for things that are imperfect, that are shambolic, and are sometimes a little uncomfortable sonically. And I think people should embrace those sides of all arts, musics, and films. The ugliness can be really needed to be represented in the world. And I think in some small part, it's fun and interesting to do it auditorily for people.
And I think also the temporalness, we put it on the internet and it's forever. Mm-hmm. It's this thing has to be this way, and that's what people come to expect. Mm-hmm. And I think part of what we love to do, and part of why we're not that active on we're going to post things this way, we're going to release these things. We have recordings, mm-hmm. and we have the pages, but we're here for now. Mm-hmm. And what is this band like today, mm-hmm. versus last month, the last record, the next record?
Yeah. I mean, we're already so far so different than what the last set of, the last recordings were. Mm-hmm. So, and all of those songs are pretty different, really. So, yeah, I think we're just here to let everybody know, just appreciate what's happening right now, just like you said. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I heard a recent interview with a comedian. I love comedy, and I love to hear the sort of the creative processes behind other arts, and I love to hear people, particularly comedians, talk about their form, and I think it has a lot in common with music. And one of them said, you can record a record, and you can record a comedy record, and you can show up and you can perform that record, but that audience is never going to come back again. But if you do a full special, and then the next time you're out, you do all new material, you're going to get fans for life because you're going to keep throwing them something that's unexpected. And I think music should listen to that, because if you're just going to reproduce a song flawlessly, perfectly, and computer controlled in a live environment, what's the difference than just putting the record on and staying home? I think you need to give somebody something live that they don't get on a recording, and it just makes music, you know, special, particularly right now in a world where people love to use the term bespoke. They love to think they've got something customized and special, but then they want to go see a cover band or tribute band do a photocopy of the thing they already like. And I think it's counterintuitive. I don't think they realize what they're doing, because it's comfortable and safe. And sure, music can and should be fun, and there's plenty of space for that. But there's also plenty of space for something that isn't. And maybe it's not fun at all. Maybe it's a really, really hard listen.
We're an ugly, sad band.
Yeah,
If you want to cry and hate yourself, then please come.
But that's my favorite. That's my favorite art and favorite music is ugly and sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, because
Well, I think
I definitely
real,
like a
like-
lot of sad, ugly music myself. So
You guys
yeah.
are calling me ugly and sad. I am. I feel that way. No, but I think honest. Like, I think just
Yeah.
honest, not photoshopped, not, put through a filter, not, AI generated, just live freaking music.
Yeah.
Created in this moment and in this moment and in this moment, not the once and then repeated forever, is the most important thing about this band.
Yep. Agreed.